Am I the a-hole for keeping my son away from the family that disowned me? In 2020, I, 30, did something horrible to my family by stealing from them to fund my addiction. I stole some electronics including old cell phones, a game console, and a Blu-ray player to buy heroin. I cannot and will not justify these actions and fully accept them as my own and their consequences. I was caught and my family became aware of my addiction. The realization did not come gracefully. It hit like a freight train on a normal afternoon when my dad went looking for an old phone in the storage closet to hand down, only to find the shelf completely cleared out. When they pieced together where the missing items had gone, the air in the house turned suffocatingly thick. It was hard to see my parents realize what was happening, watching the color drain from their faces as the reality of my sickness crashed down on them, but the hardest was seeing how heartbroken my 17-year-old little sister was. She stared at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, unable to process that the older brother she used to look up to was standing in the living room, sweating, shaking, and desperate enough to sell off her old gaming setup just to get another fix. They dropped me off at a rehab center where I spent 3 months getting detoxed and sober. The intake room was cold, quiet, and sterile, a sharp contrast to the chaotic storm raging inside my mind. As the doors locked behind me, I truly believed that once I cleared the poison out of my system and proved I was committed to recovery, my family would be waiting for me on the other side. That belief was the only thing holding me together during the agonizing first few weeks of intense physical withdrawals, cold sweats, and endless restless nights. I did not hear from them while I was in there. I tried calling to let them know how I was, stepping up to the payphone in the common room every single week with a pocket full of change, dialing their numbers by heart, but I never received an answer. Every tone just rang out until it went to voicemail, leaving me standing there holding a dead receiver in absolute silence. The day I got out, I went back home. I stepped off the bus with my modest bag of belongings in hand, my chest tight with a mix of anxiety and overwhelming hope. I walked up the driveway, reached for the front door, and found it locked. I knocked, and after a long, agonized wait, my family answered. They stood in the entryway, looking at me not with relief or love, but with cold, hardened stoicism. They informed me that they would no longer be considering me a member of the family and that I was to leave the home and not contact any of them for any reason. The door shut in my face, and the deadbolt turned with a heavy, final thud. I attempted to stay with other family, walking to a nearby gas station to use a payphone. I called my grandparents, pleading for just a couch to sleep on for a couple of nights while I figured out my next move. But when I contacted my grandparents, I was told that my parents had called them and several others to tell them that if they kept in contact with me in any capacity, they would cut off contact with them as well. My own parents had preemptively poisoned the well, making sure that every single avenue of support was completely cut off. I had nowhere left to go. I was able to see how my sister was doing via my mother's Facebook posts from a cheap burner phone I managed to get later on, but after liking one photo of my sister's graduation, I was messaged and told that I am allowed to look at the posts, but all other family members will be blocking me and I am not to interact with my mother's posts. I was completely destroyed and left on the streets. The transition from having a home to sleeping on a concrete bench behind a strip mall was swift and terrifying. The cold nights felt endless, and the shame was a heavy stone sitting on my chest every waking second. I stayed in a homeless shelter, navigating the noise, the uncertainty, and the constant fear of slipping back into my old habits. To keep myself tethered to reality, I got a menial job washing dishes at a local diner, earning just enough to get a run-down, drafty studio apartment with paint peeling off the walls. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to put my life together. I went through therapy at a sliding-scale community clinic to process the extreme grief I felt, learning how to mourn the living family who had completely erased me from their lives. I focused on work and did school online enough to finish my degree from when I dropped out at 21, staying up until 3 in the morning typing essays on a second-hand laptop. All that grueling effort eventually paid off. I was able to secure myself a very good position several states away and move there as soon as I could, putting hundreds of miles between myself and the town that held so many painful memories. 3 years ago I met the woman who is now my wife. She came into my life like a breath of fresh air, offering a kind of quiet understanding I had never experienced before. Her father went through a similar struggle with addiction and her family welcomed me with open arms, never judging me for my past, but instead celebrating every day of sobriety I achieved. Last year we got married in an intimate backyard ceremony surrounded by people who truly loved us, and 3 months ago we welcomed our son into the world. Holding that tiny boy in my arms in the delivery room, feeling his soft breath against my chest, transformed me completely. Of course, being a proud new dad, I posted my boy all over social media to show him off to the world, wanting to share my overwhelming joy. Since then, I've been inundated with calls and messages telling me that my parents want to meet my son. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly began popping up in my inbox, acting as self-appointed emissaries. They told me my parents had seen the photos through mutual acquaintances and were suddenly eager to step into the role of doting grandparents. I have no plans to allow that. My family abandoned me at my lowest and actively worked to cut me off from any familial support I could have had when I was homeless, starving, and trying not to die on the pavement. I am not owed forgiveness for my actions, but I can't pretend that what they did was anything less than complete disownment of me at my most vulnerable. When my parents finally managed to get my phone number through a cousin and reached out, I did not hold back. I told them, not very politely, that I do not consider them my real family and that they are to come nowhere near me, my wife, our son, or anyone related to us. I've been getting messages daily about how I never earned their love back and am cheating them out of having a son again, and thus I owe this to them, from my parents and others. They preach about family values and forgiveness, entirely ignoring the fact that they threw me away like trash the second I walked out of rehab. They expect me to hand over my child to serve as a warm, comforting bridge to fix their guilt, without ever acknowledging the deep scars they left behind. I am not giving in, at all, nor do I ever plan to. Am I the a-hole? Edit, there's been a lot of replies along a broad spectrum of opinions and takes. I may not have replied to them all, but I did read them all. For now, I am stepping back. My wife and I have decided that we are going to be speaking with my parents via a video call and discussing the past 5 years and where everyone stands as of today to gauge where we all are and decide how to move forward. I'll be taking everything I've read here into consideration in how I decide to approach the situation. I've seen a lot of people wanting updates. I will post an update on this when the dust has settled and I can say with some certainty what's going to be happening. Thank you all for your words of kindness, and otherwise. Every one of them is appreciated. Update. A little bit back I posted a thread on this sub. I want to thank everyone for their words, both kind and unkind. Looking back on that post, I feel like I didn't hit the mark in some areas when explaining myself and the situation, so people interpreted it in wildly different ways. I initially wanted to address some of those misunderstandings, but honestly, I'm ready to leave this behind, so I'm not going to spend this update going through every comment. The only thing I will clarify, since it came up several times, is that my family did not pay for my stay in rehab. At the time, I was making less than $20,000 per year, and my employer only offered an HSA for health benefits. I qualified for Medicaid and had been on it since I moved out of the house. Medicaid in my state covered the cost of inpatient rehab, so that is how my treatment was funded. For the sake of brevity, and because I don't want to dwell on this any longer than I need to, I'm going to give some relevant context and then summarize what my father told me during our conversation. My father came from China to the US to attend college and fell in love with the country. He hates China and communism. He saw America as a place where he could have opportunities he didn't believe were available to him in his home country, so he married an American woman, stayed here, and eventually started his own business. His dream was always that one day he would pass that business down to his son, then eventually to his grandson, with the family business becoming a legacy that continued through generations. He was very much a tiger parent, and my mother, who has always been more submissive, followed his lead. From a young age, I was told that this was going to be my future. My education, the university I was expected to attend, my major, and eventually my career were all planned around the assumption that I would take over the business. That background explains a lot of my father's position now. The call was just me, my wife, and my father. It was long, uncomfortable, and awkward, but I'm going to give the gist of what was said rather than dragging everyone through every part of it. My father views my bisexuality and my decision not to finish college as direct acts of ungratefulness toward everything he had done for me. He believes he gave me opportunities that I failed to appreciate and feels that I should be grateful he didn't take action against me earlier. He apparently tolerated my bisexuality because, in his view, I could still marry a woman and have children. He also eventually got past me dropping out of college because he believed I could still learn how to manage the family business. Even if I couldn't handle every physical aspect of it myself, he figured I could hire people to do whatever was necessary. The stealing was obviously a problem, but according to him, that wasn't what ultimately broke the relationship. The drugs were. He told me that the fact I used drugs at all meant I could no longer be trusted with his legacy. It didn't matter to him that I went to rehab, got sober, went through therapy, rebuilt my life, finished my degree, established a career, got married, or became a father. In his mind, I had demonstrated that I was capable of becoming an addict, and that was enough to permanently disqualify me from the role he had planned for me. He said that because I could no longer contribute to the family legacy in the way he expected, cutting me out completely was necessary. He saw having an addict in the family as a source of shame and believed distancing himself from me protected the family. He also made it clear that this wasn't simply how he felt back then. He still feels the same way now, and he doesn't believe anything I accomplish will change his mind because, from his perspective, I destroyed the future he had spent my entire childhood planning. The part that brought us back to the reason for the call was my son. My father believes I owe him a debt of gratitude because, in his mind, I left the family without a son who could carry on his legacy. Now that I have a son of my own, he sees a new possibility. He believes my son could inherit the role that was originally supposed to be mine. Because I previously struggled with addiction, he believes that he and my mother need to be involved to make sure my son is raised properly and prepared to take over the family legacy. Essentially, he believes that being my son gives my child a responsibility to the family that I apparently failed to fulfill. I didn't get the opportunity to speak with my mother about the messages she sent me, so I can't tell you whether she agrees with every part of this or simply follows my father's position. The call ended pretty abruptly when my wife realized that it wasn't going anywhere. There was no agreement, no real resolution, and certainly no sudden understanding between us. I was in a very bad place for the weekend after that Friday night. I don't have the words to properly explain how thankful I am that my wife was there for me. She helped me stay grounded when I was struggling, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing everything I can to be as much of a rock for her as she has been for me. Right now, that mostly means taking on as much of the housework as possible while still doing my part with the baby so she can recover physically. As our son grows, I'll find other ways to make sure she knows how much I appreciate everything she has done for me. As for the future, we've made a few decisions. On my end, I'm going to work significantly less. For everyone who asked, I ended up becoming a technical writer, and I'm quite good at it. It pays enough that my wife and I can live very comfortably even if I work well below a full-time schedule. When I met my wife, I used work as a distraction. Marco Pierre White was correct when he said work is the best painkiller mankind has ever come up with. But I don't think that's a healthy way to deal with things now that I have a child. I've decided to use the extra time away from work to attend an additional therapy session every week. I want more intensive treatment and, more importantly, I want to develop better ways of coping that don't involve working myself into the ground whenever life becomes difficult. As for our son, we have decided that my parents will not be part of his life for the foreseeable future. We don't know exactly what we'll tell him as he gets older. We don't want to burden him with adult issues or make him feel caught between family members. As he grows up and we understand more about his personality and how he processes things, we plan to speak with a counselor who has experience in child psychology and figure out the best way to explain the situation without making it unnecessarily distressing or confusing for him. A lot of people suggested that I take my wife's family name. We actually discussed that for a while, but ultimately decided that neither of us wants to simply replace one family name with another. We're going to choose an entirely new family name. It feels more appropriate for us. A fresh start and a new legacy that belongs to the family we are building rather than one I was expected to inherit. We haven't decided what the name will be yet, but we hope to have that sorted by the end of the year. And honestly, that's pretty much it. There isn't much else to report. I know this update will probably get a wide range of responses. Sorry to disappoint, but I will not be reading or responding to any of them. I know the man that I've become. I know I am a capable father and loving husband. I know I have a disease that puts me at a disadvantage when it comes to anyone's trust or respect because of my choices in the past, and I know that despite them, I will continue to be the best man I can be for my family. And as much as I appreciate all the responses, I don't need to hear strangers on Reddit praise and condemn me to know that it's true. I'm going to log out of this account after posting this, and I will not be logging back in. Thanks for reading.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update.